Hi, here we are again with another installment of 8 asteroids. And before we begin our Asteroids Part 8, I believe I called this, let's talk about the references. Okay, so first of all, once again, awesome book, Patterns of Behavior by Martha Lang Westcott. She is my teacher, and well, one of my teachers, and she probably made me my main teacher. But anyway, she has her own website at marthalangwestcott.com. Also, for those of you who'd like to maybe see what the asteroid glyph looks like, I do put the keywords, and the asteroid glyphs are on my website, divinationcounselingservice.org. You can check that out. Now, proceeding with our next installment, Part 8, we're looking at the asteroids Child, Hephaistos, House, Ornamenta, Phaethon, Requiem, Sisyphus, and Tantalus. Okay? Now, these are probably the last asteroids that we are actually going to have glyphs for. So I did want to mention that. The newer ones that we're working with are very exciting, but we haven't, there's just so many anymore to put glyphs on everything. So the Child, our first of the asteroid today, is, of course, children. And that includes your inner child. So it's a placement that can tell a person what they were like as a child, and how that maybe has continued to affect them as they're now an adult. It also could talk about how they react or interact with children. The glyph is a circle with a small circle inside, right off, attached to the right side. Hephaistos is our second of the 8 asteroids, and it represents odd couples. It goes based on the belief of the mythology. Hephaistos was thrown out of Olympus because his parents were fighting. So he became lame. But he ultimately marries Aphrodite. So he's an odd couple, a man and an odd couple. Doesn't seem like they're well suited. And he obviously comes from an odd couple. So these are odd couples. They can also be, it doesn't have to be romantic couples. It can also be couples that are maybe working on a partnership of some kind. Maybe they're just two very different people. Hephaistos is that marker that people can be very, very different, but yet still have something in common. It's also associated with metalwork, just as Volcanus is. They actually share that energy. And as a result of that, the glyph looks like Volcanus with an extra bar, so it's double barred from the arrow down to the triangle. House is our next one, and it obviously represents buildings. But it also represents the idea of the place of consideration, if you will. So it can be buildings, it can be home. When you're looking at an asteroid such as House, it is the other asteroids that can very often, or the other aspects of the chart, they can very often lead you to whether this is about your home, your office, a particular building, etc., etc. So it's also how a person feels to be in that building. So here we go again with it's the consideration of the place. And the glyph here is a capital letter H. Ornamenta, there's our next one. And it's obvious that it's gifts, it's ornaments, it's tokens of appreciation sometimes. It's a token, period. Embellishments are considered ornamenta. So ornamenta, okay? So things that embellish or ornate, decorate, are considered ornamenta. But so is something that's just done for looks, okay? So somebody is very nice to somebody because they're out in public. politicians are probably good for this, to, they're very, well, I also give and take from the lobbyists, but in which is also very Ornamenta, but Ornamenta doesn't, like if you had an Ornamenta with smiley, there's another asteroid, it could mean a fake smile because it's only ornamental. It has no sincerity. Okay, so that's also to be taken into consideration whenever you're dealing with Ornamenta. It talks of the manner of the reason for the gift. So it directly points to that. It's also about how well we receive gifts. Some people don't do well at receiving. Some people are really good at giving, but not very good at receiving. And that again would be determined or show up in their chart by house and aspects to other things. The glyph here is the sign of Venus on a tabletop, or if you will, a double barred horizontal line. So there's a double line instead of one, you have two. The Phaethon comes as our next. Phaethon is the vehicle, often associated with cars, but it can be any vehicle because it's the idea of a vehicle. So here it's vehicles of any kind. Driving cars in general are associated most often when you're going to shop for a new car. It's a Venus Phaethon in a lot of ways. You want it to be pretty. You also want it to be something you can afford. So there can be a degree of recklessness, however, associated with Phaethon. And that's if you think about somebody who just drives and gets carried away with driving. And therefore, it's kind of a reckless thing. So it also has a reckless quality to it. But it's most associated, when you read it in charts, it is such, the vehicle is often a car, particularly since most people own one. Requiem is our next asteroid. Requiem is the idea of resting in peace, or rest and no struggle with it. Okay, now that's why it's associated with funerals and death, because we don't really have an option with death. When the person dies, the idea is you rest in peace. You go to rest. But Requiem in a chart, I've seen Requiem bring up some interesting concepts of what we're willing to accept as people. And what that means is that we have to look at what we're at peace with in our life. Are we just not struggling with something and just accepting it, that's the way it is? Oftentimes people who might have had abusive relationships or abusive parents in particular had to become Requiem. It was a way to just deal with life, to wake up in the morning. You have to be at peace with it, because to continue to struggle with it is pointless. So Requiem is the idea of that peace, that inability or just no desire to struggle. Sisyphus is our next one, and Sisyphus is just to do it over again. I already had that with this video. I've already had to start it more than once. Oftentimes, when we have to do something over again, no matter how far we are with it, no matter how much we got wiped out by it, we sometimes have to start over. I also sew clothing, so I can tell you how many times I've Sisyphus. So obviously Sisyphus is very strong in my chart. So that idea of starting over. The glyph is great because it looks like a plane on a rock, so to speak, tipped over. And it looks like a ball rolling uphill, up the plane, if you will. So it's that idea of kind of going against the tide, starting over. Oh, rats, we have to do this all over again. So that's Sisyphus. Now, Tantalus, our last one, is to be tested. But I also like the concept of pearls before swine, because oftentimes when we're tested, it's about something about us, what we know, who we are, and whether or not that's appreciated by those around us, or whether it's pearls before swine. So the idea of Tantalus is often this temptation, or it's seen as a temptation. But it's really being tested, and you're being tested through being exposed to the concept of the lack of appreciation. Here we have the sign of Venus as the base of the glyph, but with a capital T, if you will, or if you want, almost like a cross at the bottom of that circle. Again, to be tested, to be tempted, and very often by those closest. So this is what Tantalus can be. In any event, I hope I see you again. Enjoy, and I'll be back probably next week with more on the asteroids. Hope you're getting something out of it and they're as exciting to you as they are to me.